everyone, to Mishmash Men, or M Cubed. Today, you are here with a very excited me, Dustin Labar, and to my left, Mr. Adam Mauser.
How do you do?
We've gotten some requests for what we're about to talk about. Well, first, let me thank you, the listener, for tuning in. And also, shout out to Charlie Mike Apparel.
Charlie Mike
Never
Weekend.
Weekend Apparel. They make some awesome t-shirts. We also have, I wore it for a reason. It is the University of Anomalous Phenomenon t-shirt.
That's a good looking shirt.
It looks great. It looks like legit. That Abby the intern made. She made the design, and then Charlie Mike printed the t-shirt. So thanks to those guys. So thanks to Abby. Also thanks to Charlie Mike.
Abby the intern.
I'm sorry. Abby the intern. So thanks to them for making this shirt happen, which brings me to the topic today, which I am very excited about.
I'm excited too.
We've gotten some requests from the listeners. And if you know me from Reaching for the Bars podcast, maybe I haven't talked about it a lot on here, but I desperately love talking about the topic of extraterrestrials, UFOs, UAPs. I just enjoy talking about it, and we'll talk about my feelings on it here in a minute, but I really enjoy talking about it. So today, me and Adam are going to have a nice discussion about, this can go a bunch of different ways, but anything UAP, UFO, extraterrestrial, multi-dimensional kind of situation. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say. I'm excited about it too. It's not that I'm averse to discussing this.
Yeah.
I've got my own opinions. They differ from Dusty's quite a bit, but that's what'll make the discussion interesting.
Yep.
And anything I say, I'm not. I want to make sure that I'm not denigrating any other views. It's just, hey, I disagree, and here's why I disagree.
So I think it is important to note that when you talk about anything that you could consider a conspiracy theory or out of the realm conversation, that like you can't be insulted if somebody says something different to it, like because you have a view on something that's like abnormal or maybe different than people.
Yeah, because I've got some different views too that I haven't shared a whole lot of,
sure.
but for sure that's
So like you should respect if you have an opinion like that you think something is different. You respect people or maybe not agree with it, but also people should respect you to know that it's just what you think. So, except for the flat Earth thing, I will insult you.
The ice wall.
yeah, the ice wall. So first off, I want to kick off by saying there is like an emotion tied to it because I find it fascinating and I really want some of this stuff to be true. I'm aware that probably not all of it is true, but I am excited. I like to talk about it. So
can I ask you?
You sure can.
And you might want to go into it later, but why do you want it to be true so bad?
Man, I don't know. Well, there's a theory. We will talk about that later. There's a couple of theories about aliens that make me feel like it gives you that like warm fuzzy feeling about it, like in a good light. And so that's part of it. I also think it's very fascinating. It's almost like an exciting thing. So like when there's something like that, I'm on the side that I want to be true. But there's a couple of reasons why we can get into it.
Sure.
So first I thought we'd talk about, recently the government has been releasing information being like, hey, maybe there is some stuff out there.
Yeah.
Which to people like me, and I think you agree on the same, this will be something that we definitely agree upon. When the government starts giving you information, you're like, well, dang it. That's not what I wanted.
Why are they doing this?
Well, dang it.
Of all times.
It was better when they were like, doesn't exist. Because then I was like, well, it probably is for sure true now.
Especially when there's been some rather embarrassing revelations from the government about folks within the government. Then all of a sudden, hey, there's, there might be something to this thing. And here's some more footage. And okay.
Yeah. So obviously there was the big one that everybody talks about is, it's out in,
Area 51?
Area 51. What did they call it? It's
Roswell.
Roswell. That's what I was thinking of. So for those of you that don't know, there was a supposed crash. Government flew in, supposedly, took the material, and then people were like, we found an alien craft.
This is like 1947,
right? Somewhere in that ballpark, right after
World War II.
Yes, correct. Right after World War II. So first people were like, hey, we found people mean like the military guys in the air, people that went off in the plane and picked it up. And then they're like, we found this craft. It's from out of this world. And then they get back to an Air Force base that's escaping me right now. but it's pretty famous in terms of like alien lore. That all Wright Patterson,
Patterson Air Force Base. I grew up in that area.
Okay, so they said they
hangar.
took
There was a certain hangar, 18 or something like that.
So what they said happened was these people were saying it's an alien craft, and then the next day they did a press release and they were like, it was just a balloon. They
like a weather balloon.
A weather balloon. All these guys who are in the military, they just made a mistake. They thought it was an alien craft, but it was just a weather balloon. So that's the first one where I think probably people started being like, there's a serious conspiracy theory in that being like, hey, why did you're telling me that guy couldn't decipher the difference between a craft from outer space and a weather balloon.
Right.
So that's kind of like where I think it kind of began. So
do you think there was something to that, or do you think it was just a ruse, a cover-up to distract from something else that was going on? I mean, that was the beginning of the Cold War, right?
Yeah. So so this is where we kind of get tricky. So there is some thought to the fact that there was increased alien activity or increased UFO activity after the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So,
because we had these more powerful weapons than they noticed.
Yeah. So basically the bigger overwhelming conspiracy theory is that they were watching us being like, oh, look at this civilization. Like we would watch an ant colony basically. Mm-hmm. So they're like, oh, look at these, look at these guys. And then it would be unlike you saw an ant walking with a knife and be like, does that ant have a knife?
Right.
Like, did it just upgrade its
serious?
Yeah. So maybe we should make sure that ant doesn't kill all the other ants.
And so they crashed.
But like their increased activity made more come around. And
okay.
Obviously the chances of something, just like an airplane, like it, the chances, if you flew 1 million of them, the chances of one crashing are probably,
Right. It's increased.
It's increased.
Like, the old saw about most traffic accidents happen within 25 miles of your house.
Right.
Well, that's because most of my driving is within 25 miles of my house.
Yeah. So we've increased it. So that's part of the thing that makes me feel warm and fuzzy about aliens is that there's a theory that, have you heard the ones where they fly over nuclear weapon silos and shut them down? You ever heard that?
I have. I heard that. So I did a little listening. I had my ears perked up on my usual array of podcasts, and it just so happened there was a couple of guys that Joe Rogan, and then there was another one I listened to, Brett Weinstein, Dark Horse podcast, and they were all talking about.
I should mention this, that if you're interested at the end of this and you're like, oh, I really liked it in either direction, Jeremy Corbell is he's probably like the biggest UFO guy in terms of like he puts out a lot of information about these sightings of craft or whatever, and he has a podcast called Weaponized, and if you're into it, it's interesting, or you can listen. He's been on the Joe Rogan podcast a couple times.
Who was that other guy that was on there with him?
George Knapp. George Knapp is the guy that broke the Bob Lazar story, which we can definitely talk about.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's like the big theory is that they fly over the missile silos. They're like, can we shut these things down if something happened? They're like, boop. Yeah, we can power them down, and then they fly off. That's like basically that they're preventing the world from going into absolute destruction because we can't control what's going on, and we're war creatures, and they don't want us to destroy the planet basically, or each other. So that's one of the theories. So yes, I think there's something to that. I think something probably did crash there, and there are a couple people that exist in the world that are still alive today that say they have actual material from that crash, like metals that are not from this world or whatever. So one of them is Jacques Vallée. Did you ever see Close Encounters of the Third Kind?
Yeah.
The French guy in that movie? That's based on Jacques Vallée. Jacques Vallée is a real person who's like he's like, I have all these pieces of metal that are from out of this world, and whatever he says. So I listen to him too. So that's one of the big ones. How do you feel about the Area 51 crash? Do you have any thoughts on it?
I've seen I've watched a lot of this, and I kind of was interested in this, especially when I was younger. The whole UFO out at Roswell. Mm-hmm. I remember growing up, there was a lot of murmurings and stuff about the hangar in, I can't remember what number it is, but out at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, because it was like literally within 15-minute drive of most everybody I knew, family, friends, all of it. And so, it's interesting to think about, especially with movies like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I was a little kid when they came out. E.T. There's a ton of alien movies. Of course, and then there's Star Trek.
Yeah. The stuff that's
Star
fun.
Wars. All these space movies about intelligent life elsewhere. So keenly interested in the possibility of it. I reject all of it now, other than it's possible. But back to your question about Area 51, I remember a lot of discussion about that. Not when I'm not that old, but when it was out, I did a lot of reading about that specific, the weather balloon, or not weather balloon, but the
craft,
that or the materials that represented a crash site.
Correct. Yeah.
So I don't know. There's nothing conclusive to it to me.
Sure. Yeah.
It's there are a lot of threads of, well, here we have these materials, and here we had some. I don't know. They have photographs of the materials, but they didn't have photographs of bodies.
Yeah.
And there have been hearsay about it.
Sure.
There have been a lot of TV shows about, like, well, there could have been these photographs, but it's to borrow a phrase, much ado about nothing, in the sense that there's really been nothing that's of substance that's been admitted and presented.
Yeah, they haven't done a good job presenting anything. Even now, this is the frustrating thing for me. I mean, if you go by the new iPhone 15, which I'm about to do, cameras on them are unbelievable. So even today, people be like, we got a video of this UFO, but the video's not good. And you're like, well, dude, I mean, I took a video on my iPhone the other day, and it's unbelievable.
It's good out to a certain distance. It's not doing the optical zoom anymore. It's just a digitally enhanced.
Yeah, I guess but some of these guys, like some of the pilots, are bringing their iPhones with them. Yeah. And they're saying they're pretty close, although close to a fighter pilot is probably different than close to Dusty. Do you know what I mean? Like they consider,
Yeah, they're thousands of feet away.
Is close to them.
Yeah, it's close.
So
a couple thousand feet. That's pretty close.
And we'll get into that stuff. So the next thing, the thing that I was really interested in talking to you about, you familiar with J. Allen Hynek?
No.
You familiar with Project Blue Book?
No, I haven't heard of that one.
Okay,
I might have, but
Project Blue Book is a real thing that did exist. Basically, they hired a professor in astrology.
Who's they?
The government. It was a governmental project, and they wanted. Their goal was to discredit any sighting with this guy as the scientist. So J. Allen Hynek, he was a professor at a college. I forget which one now. But so basically, somebody be like, I saw this. Here's a picture of it. J. Allen, there's a very famous video of J. Allen Hynek being like, you guys just confused it with swamp gas. Have you heard that term before? It's like swamp gas. So he did that for like a lot of years.
Now, what's the decades that this operated?
This was probably in the 60s.
Okay.
60s, late 60s, I'm thinking. They did end up, they did end up closing it down. But towards the end of J. Allen Hynek, he went from discrediting everything to being on the forefront of being like, hey, there's something here. Mm-hmm. Because he got to hear all the cases, and it's a really well-documented government program that was run by him. But then he kind of, towards the end, was like, something's different here. And then he actually went and spoke out like, hey, some of these people that are, and he, if there's 100 sightings, 90 of them are crap, but there's something to 10 of them. Uh-huh. And so that's a very interesting thing. So he did end up switching. It's something to look into. It's very interesting because he was like, he would discredit everything. You could fire anything. You could be like, an alien grabbed me. He's like, it was just, it was a toilet paper roll that got rogue and hit you. He could pretty much that was kind of his job. But that's a very interesting part of that history because they just closed it down and they really didn't have anything supposedly that was tracking this stuff. But they actually had I forget the name of the project now, but they were tracking it for many years after that closed down, all these sightings, and they were logging all these sightings, and they just didn't have anybody in charge of it at that point. Then there's the big case that I like to talk about, or the guy, the movie came out in the 80s or 90s, Fire in the Sky?
I remember the name of the movie. That's about it, though.
That's based on Travis Walton. Mm-hmm. So the story on him is, and they've had a really hard time discrediting him. So he was a logger, and he was in a truck with some of his buddies, and they saw this weird thing in the woods. So he jumped out, and the thing like had a pulse of energy and knocked him down, And then so everybody, all of his friends in the truck got freaked out and they drove away.
Oh, they left him there?
They were just like, they were like,
that's nice.
They were scared. And they all tell the same story. But his story is that he got sucked up into a track or picked up or brought into the spacecraft because they heard him and they like fixed him. But he like, first he fought them and then they like sedated him again and then they fixed him and then they just dropped him off where they found him. And he was missing for 5 days. Nobody could find him. There was a manhunt and his friends did try to come back. But when they came back like a few minutes later, he was already gone.
Can I offer an alternative?
Sure could.
Yeah. So could it be that they were in a spot where there was some sort of government experiment with either, some government agencies or NGOs or NGAs, or you have some DOD thing.
Yeah.
And this, in general, I think all the things that we see, you always have this common source of, well, the government said this, or we had this guy that worked for the government, or this government hired this guy to do this thing to be the counterfactual.
Yeah.
But the common source is the government in all this.
Right.
And so I'm deeply suspicious of any government agency or person that says, oh, well, no, there is none of that, and then he recants.
Yeah.
So it could have been this government program where they're working on some weapon system.
Yeah.
They stumble on it.
Yep.
And they get scared. They actually do abduct him, but it's not aliens. It's
people.
It's you and me, and we fix him up and then send him on his ways.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be.
So here's the yes to your question. Could it be that? Yeah, 100%. So I guess the first thing before we get into that part of it is like, so the government tried to hide. So me and you both agree that when the government starts telling you stuff, you need to be like, why are they giving us this information?
Right.
So do you feel differently that for years they were like, stuff doesn't exist, and then there was a switch that was flipped, and now they're like, yeah, we do actually have stuff. So, the question is, have they known all along these things exist and that they are here, whatever it is, and then there's so much information and people are saying so much stuff that they have to give a little bit just to like kind of keep us quiet. Like whatever it is way bigger than we could possibly imagine. They're giving us a little bit of stupid stuff to keep people like me quiet. And I'm like, oh, do you see that the government said that we may have, you know what I mean? Or the other reality is it doesn't exist. The government has now created some kind of crazy weapon system that is like unimaginable. And they're like, it's aliens. And they're, and that way everybody's like, they're not going to look at like it's aliens. But it's an easy kind of like slough off to be like, we didn't develop the stealth bomber kind of situation.
That's exactly what I think it is. I think it's the government's the common source in all of these. You get to a point where you can deny, and you even set it up purposely to obfuscate and just call everybody crazy. Like, there's no way that this is real.
Yeah,
those are just insane. But then technology advances to the point like the useful technology to typical American.
Yeah.
And now we get to a point like, okay, well, we're going to have to reveal something, and we're going to blame it on this alien thing that we've been trying to keep secret.
Yeah.
Because we can't divulge the real secret that we're keeping, which is this other technology that we've been working on.
Yeah, I think that is definitely a possibility. When I think about that, that's like the least fun to me. I mean,
it is not fun at all.
I mean, however, I think I said this before. Like, if we have it, I mean, that's cool. It's not somebody else's. Meaning, like America has it versus a foreign entity. That's cool, but it's not cool because I'd rather it be aliens than this crazy weapon that they've created. Now they're going to keep it a secret, and then it's just like a trump card they can play when they feel necessary, like the stealth bomber kind of thing. Because they kept that pretty quiet.
They kept that very quiet. The stealth fighter, the stealth bomber. I have a differing opinion on that, and it's morphed the past 3 years or so.
Okay.
I hate the fact that the government can keep this many secrets.
Yeah.
The fact that they do keep so many secrets disturbs me.
Yeah.
Weapon systems, keeping them that secret is disturbing to me because that means the government is better armed than the citizen.
Sure.
And I think that's a bad thing because they can control us. We know they can control us with psychological operations and with propaganda.
Yeah.
A great example of that. So we have what's going on in Ukraine.
Yep.
And remember all the Ukraine flags?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're on everything. They were on Facebook pages, Instagram pages, LinkedIn pages, social media galore. Everybody's for Ukraine. We just had a fire in
Maui.
Hawaii.
Yeah.
Where's the Hawaiian flags?
I agree with you 100%.
And so, like, why aren't we drawing attention to this? Because it's not as scope-wise, it's not as big. But these are our own people.
Yeah.
So why aren't we having Hawaiian flags?
Can
Why can't we get that much support?
Can I piggyback on that?
Yeah.
Tulsi Gabbard, and she's the senator from Hawaii.
She was in the
Congressman.
House of Representatives.
House of Representatives.
Yeah.
And BJ Penn is a former UFC fighter, but he was running for like mayor of one of the cities. They were on there, and they were like, do you know how much money it would cost for them to rebuild Maui? And, it's like, what? It's like the tiniest portion of what they've sent to Ukraine.
Yeah.
Like in recent times. Like if they just gave us this much, we could just go build Maui back. And which you don't really think about that. But when somebody like that says it, you're like, yeah, why don't we just send?
Yeah.
Like we accidentally sent $6 billion, like we on an accident, like a clerical error, like we devalued the equipment too much. And actually it was $6 billion over, and we're just like, man, just $6 billion.
It's just a bookkeeping error.
Just a bookkeeping error. And Maui's burning, and they're like, do you hear they gave the
$700
to the residents? Like, hey, I know you lost your house, but here's $700.
There's something fishy about the whole Maui fire.
It's really weird.
Quick sidebar, James O'Keefe just went and he was doing a report. He's doing reports there, and he's actually filed a lawsuit against the state government of Hawaii.
Okay.
I think, or the governor, one of the two.
Yeah.
Because of the policies, because like he can't film there.
Oh my God.
They'll arrest him. It's crazy.
Boy.
So anyway, James O'Keefe is.
Yeah, I've heard of him. So yes. So to answer your original question, it sure could be governmental in nature. Yes, it could be. I don't want it to be that. I'd rather it be aliens versus the government having all this kind of stuff that we can't figure out. Also, when it comes to this kind of thing, do you think now in this age of tech, in this age of like social media, that all these, like, because it's not just the government, like there's private contractors that are working on this stuff essentially. How do they keep it quiet? Like, how would they keep something like that quiet? Because all it would take is for you to like slip up, say something to somebody, and then it's on social media like running rampant.
Are you talking about so if it were fake or real?
No,
doesn't matter.
If it were real, if the government was like working on this crazy technology that doesn't use our laws of physics and does all this crazy stuff and is unbelievable, and they're able to keep it a secret, like how would they keep it a secret? I feel like that's impossible because there has to be too many hands in it for it to just stay that quiet.
So there's legal repercussions galore if you divulge anything, and there's also the compartmentalization of information.
Yeah.
So you could have, let's say, 1,000 people working on a particular program.
Yeah.
And let's say 2/3 of those folks are in the periphery. They just know that, I'm a contractor or I'm a government person or whatever, and I'm working on this program that's out in New Mexico.
Yeah.
And I go to this secure facility. I'm signing non-disclosure agreements.
Yeah.
If I see anything, I'm not supposed to divulge it. And there's legal and like jail time and fines if you divulge any information. And you don't see anything. You don't see anything of substance. You're just going there and you're the security guy. You're the guy that does the cleaning. You're the janitor or whatever.
Yeah.
Or you're the person that makes sure the copy machines are stocked or, whatever it is. And then let's just say 2/3. I'm just making these numbers up. And then there's the folks inside that 1/3 that might know a little, that are going to know more ultimately, that know everything. And there's varying degrees of that compartmentalization of information. To the point where the people that know the full degree of whatever it is that they're working on, whether it's, let's say it was an alien.
Yeah.
Or if it's some fantastic weapon or space vehicle or some invisibility cloaking device they have for our airplanes, like visible light cloaking. You compartmentalize it to the point where, and you restrict folks in what they can say.
Yeah.
And all that stuff's monitored. I mean, they can monitor everything. They monitor everything that we do on our computers at the NSA.
Not on my phone, right?
Yeah, sure.
That is a perfect segue into one of my favorite things to talk about, which would be counter to your argument right now. Are you familiar with the Bob Lazar story?
I am familiar. I haven't researched it a ton, but I'm generally familiar with Bob Lazar.
Okay, so let me give the people that don't know, and if you want to hear more about it, Bob Lazar, Area 51, and Flying Saucers is a documentary by Jeremy Corbell, I love it. I watch it multiple times. So Bob Lazar it doesn't have all these crazy science accolades, but he's some kind of rocket engine or like propulsion expert.
Yeah.
Just like almost self-taught, like just likes to do it. He put a rocket engine in his car and was like, so the guy, and he was working on something at MIT. I know there's like questions about his education that have been put out there. And I know he was working on some at MIT, and that's how they kind of discredited him. But
he wouldn't have been hired if he wasn't.
Correct. So they hired him. They wanted him to work on some kind of propulsion issue, and they called it reverse engineering. Mm-hmm. And so they took him out to Area S4. He had to go through all these things, and Area S4 was within, it's in Area 51 or near Area 51. Mm-hmm. So it's a top secret thing. And so what Bob Lazar's story is, they brought me in there. They're like, we want you to reverse engineer this, and they show him what they tell him is an alien aircraft. He describes it in his in that movie, and also when he's been on Joe Rogan's podcast. So if you want to hear that, go listen there. He describes what it looks like, what it felt like, and basically they were like, "You need to tell us how it works, and can you reverse engineer this so we can do it?" So he said exactly what you said: is everything is so compartmentalized. It's not the way science works. This is what he said. Right. He's like, I was propulsion. I only worked on the propulsion. I was inside the machine, the craft one time, and it was to see where the engine, quote unquote, engine would sit. And I was only in it for a second. He described it. And so he spent this length of time trying to figure out how to reverse engineer it. And the ongoing theory is that they let people try to reverse engineer it for a few years. If they don't make any headway, they shut the program down. They hope that science catches up, and then they bring people back in again. That's the general theory behind it.
And I've heard George Knapp talk about that. Like this is the problem with, he calls it like the bureaucracy of it, is you can never advance the science because you can't cross level information.
Right.
And they start and stop it, and so there's no institutional inertia.
Right, exactly. So that's the problem from that side. If you believe that it's real, and like in this instance, that's why we can't do it, is because there's no communication. It's all compartmentalized. Like if it were a real aircraft or a spacecraft, you wouldn't know if the motor was directly affecting the craft itself. Like it needed to be connected to a certain spot if you couldn't work together.
Right.
So that was the problem. So they gave Bob Lazar this big brief, which is one of my. He seems honest. Who knows? You know what I mean? It's one of those weird things.
I think he is honest.
So he says,
I'll more to that in a minute, but okay. Yeah, I think he's honest.
So he says, they gave me this huge brief, and he's like, I'm sure some of it was nonsense. He's like, to see, if I would go out, it's basically a way to discredit somebody. So if he goes out and tells the public all this stuff, he's saying some of the nonsense that they put in there, like, it's from this far away planet that exists, and it's got this kind of life that they have no idea about, but they're like, he's a crazy person. If he were to, so he was like, the only thing, this is what he kept saying, the only thing I can talk about is what I actually encountered, what I actually touched, what I put my hands on. And he said he saw in a hangar 9 crafts, all different. They had different models. He was working on the sport model is what he called it. Mm-hmm. He actually got to see it fly. Is part of his story. Like they were like, do you want to see it take off? It hovered. It did some aerial maneuvers. But they weren't able to crack it in his time. But the problem is that his wife cheated on him. And when you have a level of clearance that high, anything that could make you be like a liability, they have to shut it down. So he felt like his life was in danger. So this is what I was talking about. Like, how do you keep this stuff quiet? So he went to the news and was like, I feel like my life's in danger. I want you guys to put me on record right now, because if they kill me, you'll know this is why they killed me. So it's a fascinating story, and it was broken by George Knapp, and it's they still talk about it today. What are your feelings on Bob Lazar? I think he's speaking truth.
I think he is accurately relaying what he observed, and I don't think he's lying.
Yeah.
I think what was revealed to him was a story for specific purposes.
Yeah.
That's how nefarious I think our government can potentially be. And it might be for laudable reasons and very patriotic reasons why they would want to do this. But it's not beyond them to set up somebody.
Sure.
To, I reveal this amount of information, and I don't have all of the other pieces of information, and I imply that it's alien technology, because I just reject the notion that there are aliens out there.
Okay.
There would be too many other things that would be happening if there was an alien.
Okay.
Because right now, since they're revealing this alien stuff,
Yeah.
well, why isn't the military-industrial complex, like, why aren't we spending like crazy
To try
to thwart these aliens?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
if they can come in here and visit us, well, we need to like make sure that they don't get us.
Yeah.
And we'd be spending like crazy.
Yeah, sure.
And we're not.
Yeah. I got you. I understand what you're saying.
And so I think it was a just so story, knowing that eventually he could dime us out, but we don't care, because we want that piece of information. We want that kind of to obfuscate what we really got going on over here. I think that's what that is.
So do you feel like one of the big things was Element 115 that he said that he stole? Did you hear that part of it?
I did. I don't have any too many details, but I just remember him stealing some metal, the Element 115.
In the 80s, he claimed that he had this. This was what drove the craft, an element that doesn't exist on Earth. And then in 2013, 2014, they created it for a second, an unstable version of it. So does that do anything for you? No, it doesn't.
No.
Because
it doesn't mean that we have aliens informing of this or coming here to visit. Not at all.
Do you think there's a hypothetical situation where the government knows that aliens are here? Just let's say they do, just for argument's sake. And they're like, they are so much far that there's nothing we can do in the next 1,000 years to catch up. We just better be quiet about it. Even if we spent all the money, like they're so like what they're saying is that they have craft that can go from 80,000 feet to sea level in a second, which could be, obviously probably a drone, like a biological material couldn't, like a being probably couldn't be in there.
Who knows what's going on inside their spaceship?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So we don't, hypothetically, if you base it on what we know, that nothing could survive that kind of travel speed. They would just be
mush or plasma.
Mush, yeah. Do you think that's a reasonable thing to think, that be like, it's so far advanced that we just need to like keep it quiet?
It's possible, but what it boils down to me is like, okay, so where did these aliens come from? Like how did they get wherever they got to be?
So you mean like here? How did they get here?
No. I get it that how they traveled here, but like who created the aliens? Like how did they come about?
Well, I think the argument would be that there's a planet or planets out there in the universe, in the huge spans of space, that the thought is that they're far more advanced than us, so they've been around a lot longer. Yeah. So that things that we can't see or even fathom, so far away, and it's they're 1 million or 2 million years more advanced than us, and they figured out how to travel, but they're on a planet that supports life that we don't know about yet. That's, I would think, the other ones are, it's us from the future.
It could be
coming back, or interdimensional kind of thing. Like they're in a different dimension, and they figure out how to traverse into our dimension, and do whatever they need to do, and then go back to their dimension.
I think the time travel one is more likely than the that a separate life came about or was created. And it'd have to be created. I've got other thoughts on that. We could talk about that some other time. But it has to be created, because you can't get from small living creatures to walking around thinking creatures without information being added at each incremental level. You can't. It's impossible. It's never been observed. Yeah, it does not happen. Yeah, you can't have a lightning bolt strike an amoeba and it turn into a human, millions of years later without incremental increases of information. Right, because that's what you have. Mutations from one series to the next through natural selection. That's observed. Yeah, but you can't turn a dog into a cat. Right. You can't turn amoeba into you via the zoo. Right. It's just impossible.
I understand that.
So where did the aliens come from? That's what I'm getting at.
Well, I guess the same thing that happened here on Earth could happen somewhere else, is essentially what I'm saying. Like what and I know there's like a theological discussion that everybody wants 100%. So like, the thing that makes my friends that I talk to that are very religious, my argument would be like, well, God could create those things as well. That's not an argument.
He couldn't, yeah.
It's not an argument. It's just like if that's the bridge we're trying to get, or the thing we're trying to gap, like that to me makes sense.
Well, it goes back to the why. Like why does anybody want? Yeah. Like what? The why. You eventually get to that question.
Yeah. So I mean, I think there's also some arguments like, why would they even want to come and see us? But it's like I described earlier. If there were things out there, or even if they're time travel, I mean, if we had the ability to travel in time right now, we would 100% go back. So that's like out of the question. We would, if somebody was like, hey, I invented a time machine and y'all can use it, we would go back immediately. So that is the question. We'd go back
and answer all kinds of questions.
Yeah, we'd be pushing the gun away from Lincoln, like, that kind of stuff. We'd be like screwing with, like, we shouldn't have it yet.
We'd see George H.W. Bush in Dallas at Dealey Plaza.
Yeah,
all of it.
Yeah. We'd be all over the place. We're like, I told you he was here. Nobody should give me the ability to time travel. I will screw up history royally. But the interdimensional thing, I mean, I think if you believe in one, the other one is possible too. Like, if you believe that it could be aliens from outer space, typically you probably believe that it could possibly also be interdimensional,
right,
or us from the future. All things are possible,
right?
Because we don't have the thing. We don't have a thing to, like. We're just guessing. Or hoping.
When it comes to the alien stuff,
if somebody argued like, no, I think it's interdimensional. Like, we all have to believe all of them because we don't have a thing to say otherwise right now. We just are just going by. So the next thing I want to talk to you about specifically, because I find it very fascinating, is how do you feel about the very decorated fighter pilots that have been coming up recently saying that they've seen these crafts that were doing things that they couldn't believe and, like, visually saw them?
Yeah, those are interesting, and I think it falls into one of two categories. Well, maybe three. Let's go down. Let's walk the dog. So one is they could be just paid informants to lie. So they're just like, they're getting paid to lie. We hate to say this. Yeah. That's not very likely because that's flimsy.
Yeah.
The other thing is it could be true what they see. Like, they physically saw a physical thing that was physically there.
Yeah.
And it was doing exactly what they thought it was.
Yeah.
A third option is, we'll just call that a combo option, because it could be a little bit of, it could fall into the category of just some kind of visual illusion, like, hey, I thought I saw this thing, I'm not sure what it was, and it looked like it, but it could have been a glint, it could have been a reflection, it could have been any number of things. Or the other thing is, so the guys is the pilot that saw the unidentified aerial phenomenon, the UAP.
Yep.
Formerly, let's just call them UFOs, just because it just rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, UFO is fun too. As a ufologist, I'd prefer.
Yeah, and so, or it could be because we have the technology, we've had it for years to through the atmosphere. Like, you take lasers. They did it over in Japan. They have a whole display with convergence of lasers, and it makes it look like a real thing that's out there.
Gotcha.
And so they're playing tricks on the pilots, or they're not really playing tricks. They're just doing an exercise with these things, knowing that they're going to be in a restricted area and there could be some sightings, but we'll just chalk it off to a UFO sighting.
Sure.
And let me add, UFO does not necessarily mean that we have aliens here.
Correct.
It's just it's strictly, like, by the definition of it, it's unidentified. Right. So it's some kind of thing that
correct.
It's an aerial phenomenon.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't have to be. UFO does not directly mean alien.
Right.
But yeah, so Commander David Fravor. So the first thing you said was that maybe the government's paying them off, or like to be like these,
just say this line and he does it. That's
really hard for me to believe, because these guys are, like, decorated, like, have spent their whole life
by the government.
Well, but I mean, like, spent their whole life creating this thing for themselves, like, that they're very proud of.
Right.
And that seems like it would be like a
It's
step
not
backwards.
likely.
So the other one so this is one that I could see, is the government has a crazy thing. They know that the current fighter planes that they have right now couldn't do anything to it. Couldn't shoot it down, couldn't do anything. It's pretty safe unless it crashes for some crazy reason. They could fly it around these fighter pilots, and they may chase it, they may do it, but they're not going to shoot it down unless they're ordered to. And it's pretty safe to fly in our airspace, or that area. That is a possibility. That
we have a technology
that
most common servicemen don't know about.
And if
that's a possibility.
And if you were going to send it out, you'd want to send it out through the training of the most experienced fighter pilots you have. You wouldn't want it, what I mean? Like, that's the safest place to fly it, especially if it's not being aggressive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The other one is that, well, to me, it is a UFO, interdimensional alien, whatever it may be, and that they're out there often because they say there's a lot of sightings, and some of them are in the water. They see stuff coming out of the water.
Mm-hmm.
They see stuff in the air doing the things that they say they're doing. I don't know the answer, but these guys seem pretty sober. And so.
And let me add something, because there's always been a lot of sightings.
Yeah.
Because, like, literally, it's in this. So for the listener, I used to be a pilot.
Oh, I should have said that. That's why I asked Adam. I was interested in knowing his.
So, like, literally in the Flight Information Handbook, it's a military part of the flight information pamphlets that you get. There's this thing called a Flight Information Handbook. Mm-hmm. And it comes out, I think it's every 120 days. And in it, it would detail this thing that you would have to file if you saw a UFO. Mm-hmm. And it was called a service report, I think it is. And it just, if you are flying along and you have this aerial phenomenon that you run across, you file a service report. Mm-hmm. And so those reports get, like, regularly filled up. I never had a UFO. There have been times when I've been flying, where I don't know what that was, but and it didn't, like, broach that threshold where I took it that seriously.
Yeah.
Because it's just like when you're driving your car, you're not really paying attention to something over here. Like, what was that over there? But it's gone already. And
it's probably not Bigfoot.
It's probably not Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Probably not Yeti.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I'm sure that they get filed. I don't know what the rate of those get filed, but I think personally, what I think the government, because they're trying to distract us, and the occurrences of these reports, mm-hmm. I'm deeply suspicious of them, because the same government that is prone to do things to the citizens to distract us from something else. They've shown a propensity to do that in the recent past.
Sure.
I'm not falling for it anymore. I'm just like, okay, well, if they're saying, hey, look over there, well, I'm not going to look that direction. I'm just going to come look all other directions and see what it is that they're up to.
So in terms of that, like, I agree with you. When the government starts giving you stuff, you're like, this is not right. But then I lean, in my heart, what I'm hoping is that, for all those years before, when they were like, this stuff, you're all crazy, this stuff doesn't exist, and they were trying to keep it a secret, like, I'm leaning on the fact that maybe that they were trying to hide it then all of a sudden they're not trying to hide it. Now, it could be the fact that they do have, if you have some kind of crazy technology. So the reason that the fighter pilots are very interesting is because when you ask these guys that are, familiar with flight and physics, they're like, it doesn't make sense. Like, the physics of the thing that I saw, they can't happen.
Could it be a trick, though?
A trick meaning?
As in, remember that light show I described in Japan? So it could be like this ruse that somebody else is playing on them, knowing that they're going to file this report.
Yeah, I don't know. The disturbance on the water is a little more interesting to me. And, like, Commander Fravor, David Fravor, he's on a bunch of podcasts, and you can listen to him talk. He's a pretty smart dude. Very interesting.
We need to get him as a guest.
I think we could try, but I think he probably goes on a lot of podcasts. I mean, I would love to.
You never know.
I mean, you're a pilot, so you have an in.
Yeah.
I'm not a pilot. I'm just So he kind of comments on that because people have brought that up to him. Like, what if it's this? And he was like, listen, man, I've been flying for a long time. I know I know what a disturbance in the water looks like. I know this. I know how far. He's kind of saying, like, my past experiences are telling me that this is a real thing, not some kind of figment of my imagination or something that somebody's putting out there to trick me. Like, it's a real thing. So, I mean, I believe it, like his specifically the Tic Tac. Are you familiar with that one? Mm-hmm. It looked like we can bring the video up if you want. It looked like just you can search Tic Tac UFO and it'll probably come up. So he called it a Tic Tac. He's the one that coined it because it was what his description was. It was a big white smooth craft, and it looked like a Tic Tac. So, and he said his description of it was that it was flying as if it were a ping pong ball inside of a cup, that it was like doing like these dramatic turns. So there is a video of his. There, if you search it, I think Adam just searched. The USS Nimitz was the ship that he was taking off from, and they were doing exercises, and he found it. But it was doing these crazy things, and it actually, the reason he even saw it was because there was a disturbance on the water.
Right.
And so that's how he ended up coming to see it. So, this is a big one that's been recent because he saw it. He doesn't have footage of it from his aircraft.
Oh, okay. So this is just
So he came back.
the normal FLIR.
Well, he came back and he told he said, "Hey, I saw something crazy. I don't know what it would be." He was like whatever the highest level of his on the ship was.
Like the air boss.
He was like in charge of everybody. He
Yeah.
told his guy to go up and see if he can got it, and the guy caught it on the FLIR. But supposedly, they have radar and some crazy other footage of it that they're not allowed to release because it would give up sensitive information about our radar systems and all this kind of stuff. So that would be people are like, just release the video. And then other people are like, well, we can't because it would give sensitive information to people about how we track things or anything like that. So that may be true. I don't know. But they were able to track it in this FLIR, which is forward-looking infrared.
Right.
Forward-looking infrared. And then they switched through a bunch of modules, but they had a hard time tracking it because of how fast it was going. And they've said this thing is like unbelievably fast, like 80,000 feet to sea level in a second. And then do you know what you would know what it is? I don't know the definite or what specifically it means. It arrived at his cap point before him. Do you know what the cap point is? Yeah, it's like
a Navy term.
Oh, it's a Navy term?
Yeah.
I only know Navy hand signals, so we won't be able to communicate later. The cap point is where he was his destination.
Okay.
So he was like, I encountered this thing. I'm going to my cap, and it was there when he got there. Like he was on his way, and they were like, this thing that you were looking for is already here. Mm-hmm. So his guy went up and was able to get it and actually see it on the FLIR. Then the other one that's pretty interesting, and I'll tie it into Bob Lazar. So do you remember how Bob Lazar described the crafts flew?
No.
So he said it looks like a saucer, like you think, it has the dome on top, and then it's like round like a saucer. And he said, but when it would go into like speed mode, it would turn like its belly to its destination. So it would like the dome would be pointing left and right, and its belly would lead. So like it wouldn't fly like with the dome on top. Another guy has a video, and I think that one's called the Go Fast. But they're like, you can hear the pilot being like, you see this thing? And they're like, it's rotating, and it looks like a flying saucer. It turns on its belly, or turns towards its belly, and then takes off out of the camera view, and they can't clock it anymore. Mm-hmm. Which ties into so everybody's like, Bob Lazar said that's how they flew like in the 80s.
Yeah. And
then they found this in 2015. So that to me is very interesting. So when you look at this FLIR, what do you think? Nothing.
It doesn't change my opinion at all. Yeah,
because I'm not trying to change your opinion.
Yeah,
I just want to hear your.
It could be exactly what we are describing, where it's like there actually is an aircraft that's flying around, and he happened to catch it on his FLIR, and they also caught it on radar. And for the listeners, there are an array of sensors available to put on aircraft. Don't get confused by FLIR. FLIR is a proprietary name, or just an infrared sensor. And then you have radar sensor, and it's all in the spectrum of light, just like you learned in science class. So radar is one end, infrared is another, visible light's another, UV is somewhere out there. So anyway, so he caught something on his infrared, and it appeared to be producing heat and moving faster than what he would expect. Yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting to me.
Yeah.
And this guy seems like...
It's interesting, but I'm deeply suspicious of any common source, which is the government.
Commander Fravor said it was Commander. I was like, what rank was he? It's Commander Fravor. He said he was like so close to it that he could see it. And that's like part of the thing is some of these guys are like, hey...
He could see it visibly with his eye.
Visibly with his eye. So he was like, part of the thing with the pilots is they're like, hey, I don't know what or care what this is, but it's like hazardous for me to be out. Like, we should like address these things because there's a near miss or we could crash, and we want somebody to address it. So that a lot of these pilots are, standing up and saying something because they're worried about pilot safety and all that kind of stuff. So let me say I was going to touch on this, the one big conspiracy theory, the one big one, and then I want to talk about what's happened recently, and then we can kind of end on that. And we can do this again sometime. There's way more we can talk about. So the funny one, not the funny one, I guess. The one that's like crazy is that the aliens have been here for a long time, like thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And they found our planet, and they genetically engineered humans, and that's why they're still around. They're like watching us because, you know, people that will be like, well, you know, the brain size in humans grew exponential, like so fast over a certain amount of years, and that's impossible. It's never happened anywhere else to go from this size to this size. Like it could be genetic engineering. And they say, you know, there's cave paintings of this weird looking creature with a monkey sitting on its lap, and that was the monkey there, or the chimp that they genetically engineered to become a human and all that stuff. That's like the wild one. That's like the one that when you start getting to like, I mean, there's other wild ones too that I don't have to tag. I don't necessarily believe some of those guys, but like, so they're the ones that like the aliens built the pyramids. They're the ones that did all that kind of stuff. That's not my favorite one. I don't like that one the best. I'm sure you disagree with that for sure. Yeah. It's not on my, it's a fun one to talk about just because like they've been around. That one of the ones that, the spacecrafts that Bob Lazar said he saw was supposedly from an archaeological dig. That's what they say. So it's not the most fun one, but, I think that might just be people having fun and talking about it.
Kind of like on Superman.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly right. Yeah. So, so the last thing I want to talk about is there's a new guy that just came out, and he was supposed to be in the intelligence community. You heard about this guy, Grusch, David Grusch?
So Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp were talking about this guy.
David Grusch, yeah. So they think he's a pretty good guy and he's telling the truth. So I want him to be right so bad. So David Grusch says we have craft and biological material from outer space. Mm-hmm. The problem, this is the problem that I have, is he's just saying somebody told me.
Yeah.
Every time he says it, he's not even trying to hide it. They're like, "Did you see it?" He's like, "No, this person told me," and they can't come to light, and it can't. So, do you think that he is? So there's a couple scenarios. He was in the intelligence community. Do you think that that's a thing where they were like, "Hey, you know, you can go out and start telling people stuff, but it's fake," and he's just doing it to like rouse everybody up?
No. So the best psychological operation to do on somebody is you do not tell them the full story.
Yeah.
So you find a willing dupe. And I'm not saying he's a dupe.
I see what you're saying.
So Bob Lazar, this guy, what's his name again?
Grusch, David
Grusch.
Yeah.
David Grusch, a reliable source.
Yeah.
And you set it up to where he gets revealed a certain amount of information, and it's like a time delay. Like, okay, at a certain point, you kind of prompt and prod the guy to spill the beans.
Right.
That's the best psychological operation, because no amount of scrutiny of David Grusch, no amount of scrutiny of Bob Lazar, they're never going to change their story. They're going to always tell you the truth.
Yeah, I got you.
They'll pass any lie detector test.
Yeah.
And so, but if I tell you, and you work for me, hey, I've got an alien in my attic.
Yeah.
And I'll show you pieces and parts of some metal.
Yeah.
And I do all this stuff, and then now especially if I develop you over a period of years, it only takes a certain amount of prodding. And it all falls within a piece of what the government has demonstrated in the past of psychological operations against their own citizens, which is illegal, but they've been doing it.
Yeah. I'm not saying that's wrong. Here's what Dusty's hoping.
Yeah.
Dusty's hoping that this guy knows all the real stuff, and it's all about to come out. So what he's saying is there is a new whistleblower act that like prevents people from going to prison that have seen this kind of stuff. They just passed did you know that?
That happened within I think it happened on the last administration, I think.
Very recently it happened.
The last presidential administration.
So, but I don't know that it's ever legal you can't, even if there's a whistleblower act, I don't know that you can declassify something. Like, I don't know if you can say something legally, even if there's a whistleblower act. Like, meaning like if he truly knew a classified piece of information, I don't think there's anything that saves him from just saying it, right?
So in other words, I need to blow the whistle and on X.
Yeah.
But some of X involvement or some of X is involved in classified information.
Yeah.
Well, he can't divulge the classified information.
Yeah, he can't say it, no matter what the whistleblower thing is. So that's what I'm hoping is true, because everybody's like, well, he should just say it. But I was like, I don't think they've so just like I was talking about the radar footage, like I can get on board with somebody being like, hey man, we don't want anybody to know how we look at our radar or what our radar does or what.
Yeah, because radar is pretty interesting.
Yeah. So we don't want people we can't release these videos, even though you think that they're crazy. It's classified because we don't want anybody to get their hands on what we're doing.
Yeah.
I understand that. I can be like, okay, I'm cool. I can live with that. But then like, how does he, like, if you're him, how do you go forward? Because they don't have to declassify that information. Are you hoping that you put enough pressure on them that they'll be like, all right, fine, we'll just declassify it?
Well, the way it would work is if, let's say, it's like completely, all the classified information is just like nestled in the whole mess, and he's blowing a whistle on a portion of the whole mess. Mm-hmm. Well, all you have to do, I'm gonna be a whistleblower, and I'm gonna have legal protections over that, but eventually, some portions will have to be declassified,
right?
And then also the committee that's going to actually review it, they're going to have to be read in, because it's not like, well, we can't give these guys clearance to do this. Well, you're going to have to find a way to do it, so they can properly adjudicate the accuracy of his claim.
Right. Because to actually declassify it, like, so let's say it's something like, I don't know, hypothetically, they have an alien aircraft and it's classified.
Right.
The president could declassify it, right?
Yeah. In fact, well, most of this stuff, the president is the ultimate arbiter because it all falls under the executive.
Yeah.
So like Trump, by virtue of the fact that he was the president, can declassify anything he wants. So Joe Biden, if he's the president, can declassify anything within the executive, including all the DOD agencies.
Right.
I'm sorry, DOD and all the government agencies.
So, but who else besides him could declassify that information besides the president?
It depends. It depends on what it is. So it just kind of gets necked down. National Command Authority. There's the president. He's in charge of the National Command Authority.
Yeah.
And so there are certain aspects that, you're on one end of the board, I'm on the other part of the NCA, and then so I'm not read in on everything unless I have to be read in. So. It just depends on where it's at, but yeah, it depends.
Because during his testimony, they would ask him a question. He would talk to whoever his rep was, that was probably a lawyer, and was like, "Can't say that," and he was like, "I can't divulge who that's classified," which is frustrating for people like me because you're like, "Just say it, say like whatever it is, just say it, or show us the pictures if you have it." So there's definitely more. Information coming out, whether it's true or false, but there's a lot more information, a lot more people sending videos and, or seeing things or releasing videos or declassifying certain information. So whether or not it's true is the big question.
I think it's only a matter of time because it seems to be ramping up. I think we're in store for the next, I don't know, couple of years.
Yeah.
Something big's going to drop.
Yeah.
I have a feeling.
Yeah. I mean, even me who's like wants it to be aliens knows that tomorrow they could come out and be like, listen, we've devised this thing that's bananas and it's ours and it's crazy and it does all this crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But then the other side of me is like, they're going to come out and be like, all right, there's definitely aliens. We don't know exactly, like, cause they're not going to like, people have this like weird conception that they're going to like come down and talk to Joe Biden. They don't know who our leader is. I mean, they'd go right away. They'd be like, get out of here with this nonsense. But don't you feel like people have that theory like that like the president would know, like they're going to come and visit the president? They wouldn't know who our leader was or who any leader was.
I don't know. I mean, if
that's my theory on it.
Assuming that they're real.
Yeah.
You would think that they'd want to talk to somebody in some authority, and he is a guy in authority of certain aspects of one country.
Dude, I hope if they come down.
It'd be an embarrassment.
If they come down, I hope it's not in the next year or so. They need to get somebody else in there.
And anybody else.
A little bit more coherent.
How about this guy that, he builds houses and he's a big alien fan?
Let's
How about Dusty Labar?
Yeah, I'll do it. I would
be a better representative of Earth than that dude.
Yeah. I mean, 100%.
1,000%.
The only other funnier thing that I could think of is if they came down and Kamala Harris explained Earth to them. Like they're like,
oh my,
these creatures that are potentially millions of years more advanced, and she's like, the Earth, it's a ball, it's round, and they're like, yeah, we get it. Yeah. You see that plane over there? I mean, that thing can go into space, and she's like, space is in the sky. Yeah. They're like, no, we
have this thing called artificial intelligence. Yeah, it's artificial and it's intelligent.
I feel like they'd be like, you wouldn't. I mean, it's unbelievable that you're vice president on our world. You would not be. You wouldn't stand a chance. I think we should do this again. Let this settle up. This episode settle. Let people, if they're interested in it, and let's get some feedback. And if they look into some of the stuff we talked about, we can go a little bit more deeper.
Let's do that. And there's some other things, like there's that whole
Skinwalker?
Skinwalker Ranch.
I know about that.
And there's a lot of unusual phenomenon around the world, which in Adam's worldview, it's like it could be angels and demons.
Yeah.
Or just unexplained phenomenon of like electromagnetism or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily some kind of alien technology, but that's just me.
We should do an episode on Skinwalker.
Definitely, we could talk about that.
We should do it again.
Maybe there's that one guy that
Tim?
We need to get Tim on the podcast.
Yeah, I reach out. I'll have James reach out to him again. James, you hear that?
Maybe this will sweeten the pot for Tim.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Skinwalker. We'll talk about Robert Bigelow. I got a bunch more stuff that we can talk about. So if the listener, you're interested in it, we'll do it again.
Yeah.
Thanks for indulging me, Adam. It was fun.
Oh, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was fun. We'll do it again next time. All right, guys. Until next time. Have a
See
good
ya.
one. Bye.